Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. Coast to coast college football.
Oh, the band is out on the field. He's going to go into the end zone. He's going into the end zone.
The sickest college football podcast.
There goes Davis. Oh, my God. Davis is going to run it all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game. Auburn's going to win the football game. He ran the missed field goal back. He ran it back 109 yards.
It's going to be sick.
That's right. It's the Sick Podcast, coast to coast college football. I'm John Lund, the East Coast side. He's Dan Lynch, the West Coast transplant. It is Wednesday, May 14th, 2025, as we record this, and we're excited to bring you yet another college football show. And let us be the last to hopefully wish you all on the women's side a happy Mother's Day, especially to our mothers. I'm sure they're listening intently to our shows. This being the second episode, they should be well-versed in the Coast to Coast College Football Podcast. Dan, how are things in sunny, assuredly, Los Angeles?
Oh, Johnny boy, we miss you over here. Things are absolutely amazing. Let's just say things are sick. But yes, happy Mother's Day to absolutely everyone, especially my mother who just had knee surgery yesterday. So she's definitely listening, recovering in the hospital room to the Sick Podcast. And just getting all informed. And she wants to know what we're going to get into today, Johnny boy.
My mother, too, on the up and up from a surgery. As my parents like to tell me, and this is great advice to everyone, don't get old. Yeah. I think my grandmother started that phrase when she was getting up in age. I think we can all agree to that. And even though we're millennials, I feel it as well. Don't get old. Just
don't get old. Don't ever get old. What is old to you? Like, because now in college football, like anyone can be playing between like 19 and basically 26. So from people who are over 30 mark, what is considered old to you now?
Yeah, football-wise, I think if you're in your 9th year of college football playing tight end for Miami, say, you're probably at your precipice of being too old. From just hearing athletes talk in general, this might have changed a little bit with NIL and the transfer portal and the opportunity to play at least an extra year, sometimes 2, sometimes 3. You feel like you're too old once you're in a graduate program and you're going to be 23 playing on the team against 18-year-olds, sometimes even 17-year-olds if they get to spring football fast enough. So you usually hear the grad school life is when you're too old. As someone that lived a block away from a college bar that he happened to attend quite frequently, let's say, really after turning 21, but especially senior year, there was a lot of interactions with said establishment. I think once you graduate and then once you start not seeing people that are familiar to you around those confines, time to throw your tennis sneakers over the power line, aka Marshawn Lynch, and just kind of let it go. Once you're like 25 and around the college scene, you still feel young, but for whatever reason, the kids there realize it's over for you. So it's probably time to let it go and then try to get to a new part of your life, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, it definitely is. And then you just start a college football podcast so you could still feel young and talk about the younger generation playing America's favorite sport. So, yeah, I think so, too. I mean, we're going to be seeing a lot of older kids probably in the next like 2 or 3 seasons playing college football just because of, one, the COVID allowance that gave him an extra year, but also redshirting, even brown shirting. I mean, listen, Tyler Shuck was, 26 playing last year college football?
Yeah,
so
married his whole life.
Married, literally ready to go.
Football.
But yeah, man, it's a crazy time to be talking about college football. Younger players and older players all welcome into this wild world that we call college football.
Now, you've had opportunities to do a little man on the street work over in the old Los Angeles, especially at the Rose Bowl for either UCLA or USC games. You've got the microphone ready to go and get a couple great quotes from sometimes sober, many times not, students excited for the game about to happen. Do the students all know that it's over for you? They know that you're clearly, most of the time, sometimes 8-10 years older than they are, and that you're doing a professional job. You're not there with the student radio station or the television station.
Yeah, I would say the first 2 years of doing it, I kind of blended in. Like, maybe this kid could be a grad student. Maybe he's just like a rich senior who's just lived his life and, he's finally ready to graduate like year 6. But then, like, I would say 2 years ago, I stopped looking like the college students. And it was definitely like, who is this dude? Like, why are you bothering me right now? But I have the spirit of a college student. I have the charisma of a college student. I'm always trying to be in the mix and say the newest trendy words, skibbity Ohio. I know what's kind of going on to a certain extent, but yes, students definitely recognize that I'm not one of their peers, and that hurt. Probably 2 years ago, and I was like, man, I am old. I am old. But hey, I'm still showing up every Saturday. I'm ready to go. I'm not hungover. I'm not hungover as bad as they are, but
true. That's a big giveaway sometimes too. Oh, this guy.
These college students are a lot more mature than I think a lot of people realize nowadays.
Yeah.
But listen, he's showing up to the Coliseum on a Saturday morning, or the Rose Bowl, where that parking lot is a party zone. Not a lot of people, I think, realize that and associate UCLA football with a decent fan base. They actually do, because when you watch a game on TV at the Rose Bowl, they take the worst shots of the crowd, where, especially in the beginning of the year, where they're playing like a week 0 or week 1 game where it's like really hot in Los Angeles, only one side of the stadium is filled up. The other side isn't, just because it's directly in the sun. But they do show up. Also, that stadium is massive. So filling up that stadium on a bi-weekly basis is kind of hard, especially when the team isn't that great. But hey, things are looking up at UCLA, man. Nico coming out west. I expect the Bruins to actually not be that bad in the Big Ten this year.
Yeah, they have been an unfortunate meme several times, especially at the beginning of the season when they moved to the Big Ten. It's like, this is what you're bringing to the table, this sparse crowd at kickoff. We're supposed to expect that you people are worthy for the Big Ten, say the Big Ten fans, as you say. Hold on. There is, of course, the joke. Students may rather be at the beach, but you start winning football games. If you build it, they will come, as the saying goes. So if UCLA can get some stuff going this season, there's no doubt they're going to have enough people there and hopefully avoid the meme culture that is ever so mean on social media. But yeah, it's to the point for both of us where he doesn't even go here, to quote Mean Girls, a movie that folks may not even realize was a thing back in the middle 2000s and not a remake that they happened to come out with a couple years ago. So we are showing our age, no question about that. There are a couple outstanding items in college football as we speak off the field that have taken on a life of its own. And one of them in particular, the dust thankfully is starting to settle, specifically too for Cleveland Browns fans. Now that spring practice has started, 7-on-7 drills, 11-on-11 drills, videos from journalists and reporters that cover the Cleveland Browns are showing the highs and maybe some of the lows, because you can edit things however you really want to. But
of course,
we're of course talking about Shedeur Sanders, who was the main talking point when it came to this year's NFL draft, where he would be taken, what impact he would have on the team that decided to draft him, what impact he would have on the field for them, off the field for them. And then the talking points escalated, to say the least, specifically on the draft coverage of ESPN and one Mel Kiper, when he continued to fall down the draft board, and not just on day 1, not just on day 2, but falling down to day 3 before he was finally taken in the 5th round by the Browns, and not even as their first quarterback. So I think we can take some time to just break down who Shedeur Sanders is for people that may not know about him on the field, playing for Colorado for his last 2 years, coming from an HBCU where his father was the head coach, Deion Sanders, a legendary NFL and college football Hall of Famer for both of those instances, happening to play against the latest Heisman winner at both stops as well, and how he really invigorated Colorado football to the point where they've already retired his number, which again, based on the NFL draft, unfortunately for him, turned into a meme that the number 2 that's up on the board meant day 2,
Yeah.
and then it got even worse for him as the days went on. But for people that don't know, he did have a pretty prolific college football career that he gets to put on the back of his Topps football card if they make football cards and not just for baseball. He was 11-2 as a freshman. He was 12-1 as a sophomore at Jackson State. He threw for 3,732 yards for 40 touchdowns and ran for 6 more. Then he was the SWAC Offensive Player of the Year. He won the Deacon Jones Trophy as the top HBCU Player of the Year. His college football and Hall of Fame dad, as we mentioned, future Heisman Trophy winner, they all come with him to Colorado, and they immediately took the college football world by storm. They beat defending national champ runner-up TCU on national television right out of the gate.
Week
It was
1.
like, who are these guys? And poor Sonny Dykes, just coming off a complete drubbing to Georgia and then having everybody and their mother watching Colorado play TCU and taking the loss. Then they beat Nebraska. Then they beat rival Colorado State. It's like, uh-oh. What do we have here?
Ralphie's running, brother. Ralphie is running.
We're going to be in for an exciting season as a junior for Shedeur Sanders, but then the wheels kind of came off the cart. They went 4-8. They finished 9-4 the next year in the first time they were in the Big 12. They made the Alamo Bowl, which we'll get into on maybe a sign of what was to come for Shedeur Sanders in the NFL draft. But he finishes his college career with 14,353 yards, 134 touchdowns, just 27 interceptions. He threw a touchdown pass in 49 straight games, which is the longest streak in NCAA D1 history, the second longest streak in NCAA history. And if you did it in the NFL, it'd be the third longest streak there. He completed 74% of his passes with an NFL QB rating of 117. His college rating was 165.9. And then Colorado records, passing yards, completions, attempts, touchdowns, completion percentage, quarterback rating. He won the Johnny Unitas Award as the best college quarterback in college football, and he was first team All Big 12. Mm-hmm. All that predicted the results that he would be taken in the first round of the NFL draft, at most the second. And instead, it didn't happen until the third day when the Browns took him as the 144th pick in the 5th round. What were your thoughts as this was happening? As somebody that's watched Shedeur Sanders, he's not quite as close to Los Angeles, but based on timing, different times where they do play football from Colorado, we've seen enough of him on the field to get a decent feel on what he could be as a college quarterback. When you were watching him slide and the narratives that were surrounding maybe why he was sliding, what were you thinking when all this was going down a couple weeks ago?
The second he came out of Jackson to Colorado with Travis Hunter, right? I just want to put that in there, with Travis Hunter, because all the numbers that you just brought up there, I don't think would have happened if Travis did not come. So that's the one side of Shedeur that I think a lot of NFL scouts were kind of looking at. It's like, hey, who was on his team? This freak of nature named Travis Hunter, who was playing both sides of the ball and also making insane catches, getting open against literally nobodies at the HBCU school. No offense to them. That's just the honest truth. Then you get to the big boy levels playing in the Pac-12, had a decent year there. And then when you got to the Big 12, even stepped it up more. I saw Shedeur play twice. Once against UCLA, he lost to UCLA. But the biggest thing for me was watching him and getting beaten, because his offensive line was, no offense, I love my D3 brothers, but it was a D3 offensive line playing against freaks, especially that year he was playing in the Pac-12. I think 2 or 3 guys from the UCLA got drafted, I want to say in rounds 1 and 2. So he was playing against some big dudes, and it definitely was an adjustment for him, but you could tell he had the intangibles to be great. If you just stick around, you get used to the timing of the game, the speed of the game, he could be a good player. Year 2 in the Big 12, definitely stepped it up. I think as a player, he has potential to be pretty good in the NFL. I don't know if he's going to be great. I don't know if he's ever going to win a Super Bowl, but he has the intangibles. He's pretty fast. He's pretty athletic. He has a rocket arm and really doesn't make too many mistakes. He doesn't really just try to force balls in. He could tell he is a student of the game. But with that all being said, I do think his personality has gone in the way, especially on draft night when he had that, kind of weird setup with the legendary stuff in the background. And, he looked like he was expecting to go in the first round. And he got humbled dramatically. One, from the praying phone call we could definitely get into, but two, just NFL scouts realizing, hey, you're not that guy that you think you are, not who your father thinks you are, who the internet thinks you are, who even Travis Hunter thinks you are. You're just not that guy, and we're going to humble you a little bit. Obviously, there were so many different reports coming out about him in his interviews with multiple NFL teams that did not go well. The anonymous sources, aka Brian Dable from the New York Football Giants, claimed they had a terrible interview, gave him homework to study a couple plays, and come in here and break it all down for me, had absolutely no clue what was going on. I think I read a story also elsewhere that when he would do interviews with teams, one Deion Sanders would give a call in the middle of the interview and say, hey, my dad's calling right now. You want to talk to him? And these GMs, these coordinators are like, no, I'm talking to you, Shedeur. Like this is what we're doing right now. Whoa, what is going on? And I do think that Shedeur has had a blessed life. Obviously, your father is probably one of the best, maybe best defensive players to ever play the game. You kind of have everything handed to you. Your father became your first college head coach, then your second head coach, and everything was kind of tailored to you. And this is kind of going to be just like a humbling experience. And nothing says more humble, like we're going to humble you, then we're going to send you to the Cleveland Browns. And it's going to be an adjustment for him, obviously looking at a ton of the clips on social media that he's throwing against nobodies, he's throwing against there. He looks good, but you better be looking like that if you're not throwing against any competition, right? The guy that they brought in before him, Dylan Gabriel, played at UCF. Then he went to Oklahoma. Then he went to Oregon, brought Oregon to the Rose Bowl last season. That guy's a winner. That guy's a winner who's obviously not as, big as these other NFL draft prospects who are playing quarterback, who are over 6 foot, big hands. He's not that guy, maybe 5'10", but he's an athlete and he's a winner, and he's going to work his ass off when he gets there. So I think that kind of combination is perfect for Shedeur to come into the NFL. Hey, I got competition here. I got Joe Flacco coming in. I got to become a completely different person. I need to become someone who I've never even thought I had to become, because I've had this my entire life. Everything has been set up for me. But now I am in Cleveland, Ohio, playing for the Browns, who, everyone knows that very famous picture of the quarterback jersey with all the names on it. Just add those names in there. Maybe he could become that guy. But from an on-field perspective, Shedeur has it. Shedeur has the arm. Shedeur has the ability to break down a defense, check it, and he could become a good NFL quarterback, but it's going to be up to him.
I think the biggest red flag for his play on the field, aside from not having the best offensive line, sometimes scrambling for his life, being able to make plays by himself, either with his arm or with his legs, came in the 2024 Alamo Bowl. That was on December 28th of last year. And BYU wrecked Colorado, 36-14. It was just a rout. BYU scored in every quarter, and they held Colorado to just 210 total yards and 2 net rushing yards. Sanders throws for 208 yards and 2 touchdowns, but had 2 interceptions. He was sacked 3 times. BYU gave Colorado's offense 17 different looks on defense in the first half. They even showed on the sideline, I think it was part of Shedeur and the Sanders' camera crews that follow them around for every game, where he's sitting next to Travis Hunter and just being like, dude, I don't know what they're doing at all out there. I can't figure anything out. They're throwing everything at me, and I don't know what to do. And that tape was one of the first signs of how much can this guy do when it comes to not knowing what a defense is going to throw at him. What weaknesses did he show in that game that could carry over to the National Football League, where you've got defensive coordinators that are wizards, that are able to throw everything at you for your weaknesses, and before you know it, the game is over before it even starts. I think that was the first time where people could have said, wow, look at what BYU, of all teams, we know how good BYU is at the Big 12 level, but for people that were just maybe seeing them for the first time that season because of how late their games usually are, BYU is doing this to Shedeur Sanders? that might be a problem when it comes to the National Football League.
And speaking of age, Johnny boy, those dudes on BYU are all like 24 to 26 years old. Maybe
they're another Tyler Shuck type of wives, children.
Yes.
They've been around football for a long time. Those are
that Alamo Bowl is basically their Super Bowl. A lot of those guys were not going to the NFL. Like, this is where we're hanging it up right now. But to go off that, John, right? Like, from the Shedeur camp alone, from there, he should have been like, hey, I'm going to play in the Shrine Bowl. I'm going to go in that East-West Shrine Bowl and play. I'm going to even try to go to the Senior Bowl and play, because that was the last impression that he had on scouts and NFL fans. And, listen, everything that you could do in the regular season the last 2 years at Colorado, even what you did at Jackson State, all pretty much got erased from that game. That next step should have been, hey, I'm going to go compete at the Shrine Bowl, show NFL teams, coaches, scouts that I am an actually decent player, and I should be selected before at least the end of the second round. I think that clearly hurt him going into the draft process, is not taking that step.
And you think I'm only doing this because I have a Heisman Trophy winner as my wide receiver? Let me show you what I can do with these other guys that I could sling the ball around to. He missed both those opportunities. The NFL Combine obviously wasn't something he was too interested in, so we didn't get a lot of people say it's like the underwear Olympics, where you're doing these simple tasks to show how much you could bench press or whatnot, but you can still have an opportunity to throw the football and impress some people, even though you're just in a practice setting, just kind of slinging it around. Following that game, what ended up happening leading into the draft, if you probably asked him now, he would say that he would have wanted to do things a little bit differently, just based on the perception that ended up happening with those several days where people started whispering, well, here's why. Here's, as you mentioned, what happened with Brian Daboll, who we saw in Hard Knocks on HBO, really have an opportunity to sit down with some quarterbacks and show them breaking things down on a whiteboard, where you're like, wow, this guy really knows the game. And several quarterbacks went through that, and we got to see that behind the scenes. And we didn't get that opportunity with Shedeur Sanders because he didn't want it.
Yeah.
So leading up to the draft, it wasn't the best of situations for what he had done off the field. I will say, too, what I didn't like about the draft process and what the narrative ended up being from the draft analysts and the pundits and the reporters, and more specifically, Mel Kiper Jr., who was beside himself.
Oh my God. Yes.
Cam Ward's the first pick of the draft, taken by the Titans, and he's a great story in college football from what he did in his last year at Miami and his career overall, on how he got to that stage. And they basically just blew right past it. It was, okay, that's cool. And by the time he makes that way too long walk to get his jersey, and for whatever reason, everybody loves dapping up Roger Goodell to get that photo opportunity, it was on to, well, we know who the best quarterback left on the board is. It's Shedeur Sanders. Cue highlight tape. To Mel Kiper just screaming. And at one point, Reese Davis having to be like, hey, man, maybe let's bump the brakes here a little bit and draw some excitement from these other players that are also getting drafted. He's going to get his time. What I didn't like about the whole process is, we know this from just watching and covering college football, is the draft folks for the National Football League are so excited to get out their first mock draft. Here's where all these guys are going to go.
The 1.0.
As soon as the whistle blows to end the national championship, we get the mock drafts out immediately, the way too early. And then they get updated as weeks go on. And here's where guys are going to go. And everyone to a T had Shedeur Sanders going to the first round, which is fine. And deservedly so from what we saw on the field. For him to fall to the fifth round, and then, as you mentioned, the anonymous sources coming out of the woodwork being like, well, if you just look at his intangibles as a quarterback, he could very well just be a fifth-round quarterback, and he was taken where he should go. Why we didn't hear about that from anyone leading up to the draft, during the draft, and it doesn't come out until the dust finally settles and he does go in the fifth round, is preposterous to me. Because now in the social media age, if somebody had their picks and their predictions putting Shedeur Sanders in the fifth round, they'd be the first one to stand atop the mountain and say, hey, I knew this was coming before anybody else did. And we got none of that.
Yeah.
for the pundits and the analysts and the draft obsessed folks to completely miss on this dude was wild to me. And then having to backtrack what they think was the reasonings and, well, maybe this was why. Nobody had an answer for it, which leads me down the road of why should I bother listening to any of you people when it comes to your mock drafts and your predictions and your whatnots if this was such a historic miss? Not even just, well, this guy fell through the cracks. He was the guy for most of the college football season. If you looked at DraftKings and FanDuel and everything before the season started,
Heisman
chance to go first pick. Shedeur Sanders was the number one guy at plus 100. I did not bet this. And if you're betting on who you think is going to be the first pick before the college season even starts, there's a number to call. But this is something that everybody missed on. How could this have possibly happened where no one saw this coming? Y'all need to do better when it comes to your draft coverage because this is just a historic miss of epic proportions. And it's too bad that was such a negative clouder on this dude.
Yeah, I think there's two lessons learned from this going forward. If you have a personality and you're trying to go to the NFL, you're going to really have to tone it down when you're going into that final season of your career. Because I do think that impacted Shedeur going into a lot of these meetings where, listen, a lot of these GMs know him just from social media, know him just based off his name, seeing him on TV doing his rap show or his rap song, doing the perfect timing, doing all that stuff. So I think that's one lesson there too. And two is no one really knows the draft other than the 32 NFL scouts and front offices who will be making the picks. It's almost impossible to predict what will be happening, what really fits, what happened in that workout, what happened in that meeting. I mean, it came out a little bit, but not everything. So going forward, I do think a lot of players are going to learn a lesson from this, like saying, hey, I'm not that guy yet until I make it to the NFL. Doesn't matter what my last name is. Doesn't matter what I did even in college, because guess what? I could fall to the 5th round. And I bet you going forward, we will be hearing the term, I don't want to get Shedeured.
Yeah.
AKA falling to the 5th round because of my off-field stuff. Just play it on the field, be that guy. I'm not saying that it'd be a complete bore, but don't get Shedeured.
Don't get Shedeur. And it could be a great example for guys now that are coming up through the draft in the next several years, that's something that hopefully they can at least try to do the quote unquote right things and be able to put a good story around their name. Because if not, these GMs, these front office folks, they'll look for absolutely anything to be able to bring you down a notch and be able to back up their reasonings for it. This guy was a 5th round quarterback, and we made the right decision taking him over we did. And there's stuff that comes with that too, as we've been talking about. You may not want the quote unquote smoke that's going to come with a guy like Shedeur Sanders, who has his own social media team, who has a legendary father who will be happy to talk about how good he thinks his son is, which is perfectly fine. But once he doesn't go as he's going to be your guy, it became a matter of, well, what team wants to take that plunge and see whether or not they can handle all the outside noise that potentially will follow him. And of course, as you mentioned before earlier in the show, it's the Cleveland Browns. So now you've got to compete with former Super Bowl champion Joe Flacco as a Broncos fan. We don't have to get into the year that he won the Super Bowl. Kenny Pickett, also a Super Bowl champion. You may not know, small hands Kenny. Dylan Gabriel, you talked about, who the Browns drafted in the 3rd round, and injured/disgraced Deshaun Watson, who will probably not play at all this season based on him getting back from an injury. So he has an amazing opportunity ahead of him. It seems like he's doing all the right things now and saying all the right things now and basically saying, hey, I understand the process. You can kind of view me as a Tom Brady of sorts, who's a close friend of his, or at least talk to him before and after the draft about this process and how he can change his mindset for what's ahead of him, that I'm viewed as the underdog. I take that responsibility. But if you look around the league, I'm not sure there's a better opportunity for him to compete for a starting job when you've got to beat old man Joe, who can win you a couple football games just because that's what he does, but he's obviously not your future. You've got to think you're better than Kenny Pickett, and you've got to think you're better than Dylan Gabriel just based on what you did in college. So you use that as motivation and you do all the right things and you try as hard as you possibly can to make this happen. I think he ended up actually in an incredible situation. And if it wasn't for all the noise surrounding this from day one, from day two, and then finally when he was taken in day three, if you just looked on paper where he ended up and what his opportunity is now with the Cleveland Browns, if he actually takes a second to look at the situation, he's got to be feeling great about himself.
Let's just say, John, it's perfect timing.
Perfect timing.
Perfect fit. And yeah, I do think so. I mean, it will be interesting to see how the Browns use him. I mean, can they use him as trade bait? I mean, can they use him as like, hey, we got this kid. Like, let's see how he performs in the preseason. If he's balling in the preseason, making crazy throws, not going against like, the 2 and 4s, but he potentially could be something like playing and starting somewhere else other than the Cleveland Browns. But yeah, listen, if you had him, right, and you used your big board and the next best player available, he was probably there for like 30 picks. But just based off everything that we said, his draft process, kind of how he handled everything going from that last BYU game to, was it April 24th or something like that? That definitely held him back. But hey, everything will be filmed going forward. Everything, every rep, every single second that he throws something off a little bit will be taken into consideration going forward. So, hey, I hope nothing but the best for him. He did screw me over one time at Pac-12 Media Day, but listen, I can move on because I'm an adult. But I do think that is his personality, and I do think that that's how he's going to be going forward. Would it be amazing, though? Let's just throw this hypothetical to close out. Trevor Lawrence doesn't work out. It's just not there. But you got Travis playing both sides of the ball. Hey, I'm pretty good. I can now influence a little bit into the Jaguars front office. Call my boy Shedeur, bring him down to Jacksonville. If that happens, you heard it here first on the Coast to Coast podcast on Sig Media, brother.
And it wouldn't be a bad legacy for whoever it ends up being someday to become the Cleveland Browns quarterback that finally gets to stand either inside or outside the stadium and light that jersey on fire that has way too many quarterbacks listed as busts for that franchise. They can have a ceremony. They can dig a hole and put it under the stadium. One time, hopefully in our lifetimes, we will see that quarterback that's able to say, it ends here. Look at what I've done. Look what I've brought to this city. We can finally put this jersey to rest. I don't know if that'll be Shedeur Sanders. Whoever it may be is going to have the best time of their life when Cleveland fans can finally say, we've done it. We've won.
We did it.
So that's Shedeur Sanders. There was a lot to talk about because it became this huge, huge story surrounding the NFL draft. There's another huge story that's happening off the field with one of the most legendary NFL head coaches to ever grace those fields that's having quite the time getting ready for the 2025 college football season. We'll get into that in our next show. Of course, talking about one Bill Belichick. That'll do it for the Sick Media Coast to Coast College Football Show. I'm at London Bridge on Twitter. He's at Dan Lynch Sports. That's SPURTS. We're on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Twitter, wherever you want to find the show, you can find it. I'm looking forward to doing it again next week, Dan.
Let's do it, Johnny boy. Coast to coast.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast Coast to Coast College Football on YouTube, X, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.